on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that have trespassed against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, who in thy wisdom and goodness hast appointed the office of rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of men, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor us thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of importance for us on this island. Let thy blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands, and of those whose interest thou hast committed to our charge. And this we beg for Jesus Christ his sake. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Members, the House is now in session. Members, the minutes of the 6th of May have been circulated. Are there any amendments or corrections required? There are none. The minutes will be printed, confirmed as printed. Thank you. Messages from the governor? There are none. Announcements by the speaker. The only announcement this morning is that we've informed that Minister Hayward will be absent today. He asks us to note that. Messages from the Senate? There are none. Papers and other communications to the House? There are 3 papers today. The first is in the name of the Premier and Minister of Finance. Premier, would you like to present your paper this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the information the Honorable House of Assembly, the Bermuda Monetary Authority Annual Report 2021.
Thank you. The next is in the name of the Minister of Health. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly the Pharmacy and Poisons 4th Schedule Amendment Order 2022.
Thank you, Minister. And the last is in the name of the Minister of Works. Minister? Minister Works? Minister? We'll move on.
Mr. Speaker, can I do it for the Minister, if you don't mind?
Is there any other? Premier, would you like to present it for him?
I most happily may, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, certainly, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Public Works, I have the honor to attach and submit for the consideration of the Honorable House of Assembly the lease between the Ministry of Public Works and Gorham's Limited.
Thank you. That concludes the papers and communications for today. Petitions, there are none. Statements by ministers and junior ministers. This morning we have 10 statements. The first is in the name of the Premier. Premier, would you like to present your first statement?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Section 28 of the Bermuda Monetary Authority Act 1969...
Can I remind members to turn cameras on? I don't see your camera there this morning, Premier.
Mine is on, Mr. Speaker.
I see him, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, well, it must be my end. We have an issue here.
I see him too. He ain't the prettiest guy around, but
thank you, members. Thank you, members. We'll sort it out on my end. Thank you. Can you, Premier?
You might have been having a problem here, Mr. Speaker, as well. I just realized the mic was on the table. No problem. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Section 28 of the Bermuda Monetary Authority Act 1969, I'm pleased to table the Bermuda Monetary Authority Annual Report 2021, hereinafter referred to as the report. Mr. Speaker, established more than 50 years ago, the Bermuda Monetary Authority is the independent regulator of the financial services sector in Bermuda. The authority operates pursuant to the Bermuda Monetary Authority Act 1969, which provides with a number of principal objects, including the supervision, regulation, and inspection of financial institutions operating in or from within Bermuda, together with the promotion of financial stability and the soundness of financial institutions. Mr. Speaker, the House will be aware that the authority has specific licensing and supervisory responsibilities under the following regulatory statutes: the Banks and Deposits Company Act 1999, the Digital Asset Business Act 2018, the Insurance Act 1978, the Investment Business Act 2003, the Investment Funds Act 2006, the Fund Administration Provider Business Act 2019, and the Trust Regulation of Business Act 2001, together with other statutes. Mr. Speaker, the authority's mission is to protect and enhance Bermuda's reputation and position as a leading international financial center, utilizing a team of highly skilled professionals acting in the public interest to promote financial stability, safeguard our currency, and to provide effective and efficient supervision and regulation. Mr. Speaker, the tasks the authority must address are significant and varied and critical to the country. In carrying out its responsibilities, the authority works with a range of entities, supervisors, industry stakeholder groups, international standard-setting bodies, as well as a number of government ministries. The authority works in close cooperation with the Ministry of Finance and the Financial Policy Council. Mr. Speaker, the authority has received international recognition of its work. The House will be aware that Bermuda is one of only 7 total jurisdictions worldwide that has received the United States National Association of Insurance Commissioners Qualified Jurisdiction status. Additionally, Bermuda is just one of 3 jurisdictions to have received the NAIC elevated status of reciprocal jurisdiction. Bermuda has also been granted equivalent status under the EU Solvency II Directive for its commercial insurer sectors. Mr. Speaker, at year-end 31st of December 2021, the authority was comprised of 219 full-time permanent employees as compared with 217 in 2020. Mr. Speaker, the authority is authorized to act as an advisor to the Minister of Finance on policy matters relating to any financial institution. Accordingly, it may propose laws where it can do so appropriately and consistently with its functions under the Act. The regulatory proposals covered during the relevant period included, but not limited to, insurance, investment business, anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism financing, fees, and digital asset businesses. Mr. Speaker, members' attention is drawn to the following key highlights. Banking sector. Mr. Speaker, while the number of banks in Bermuda remain unchanged at 4, the consolidated assets of the banking sector increased by 4.8%, or $1.2 billion to $26.8 billion in 2021. This change was in line with an increase in deposit liabilities and is evidenced primarily by cash and deposit liabilities increasing by 26.3% to $5 billion. Mr. Speaker, investments retain the largest share of total assets at 46.1%, followed by loans at 32.6%, and cash deposits at 18.8%. Mr. Speaker, the loan-to-deposit ratio increased from 87% to 81% at the end of 2021. Conversely, the industry recorded a 1.1% increase in gross loans during 2021, increasing from $8.8 billion at the end of 2020 to $8.9 billion at the end of 2021. Moving on to the insurance sector, Mr. Speaker. 1,158 insurance companies were registered as at 31st of December 2021, as compared to 1,193 in 2020. There were 64 insurers registered in 2021. Mr. Speaker, total capital and surplus was $350 billion in 2020, and gross written premiums were $295 million in 2020, Mr. Speaker, up from $198 billion in 2019. With the investment sector, there were 49 licensed investment business providers operating in Bermuda in 2021. The aggregate total assets under management was $252 billion compared to $232 billion in 2020. 73% of the assets under management pertain to European clients, while 18% pertain to Bermuda clients. Total assets under administration were $31.5 billion compared to $30.6 billion reported for 2020. Mr. Speaker, there were 799 licensed investment funds operating in Bermuda with a net asset value of $200 $319.6 billion. Mr. Speaker, there are 23 fund administrator licenses in issue at the end of 2021 with $195.5 billion of assets under administration. Mr. Speaker, the total market capitalization of the Bermuda Stock Exchange stood at $334 billion at the end of 2021 as compared to $255 billion at the end of 2020. Mr. Speaker, a total of 281 new insurance-linked securities were added to the BSX in 2021, increasing the nominal value up to $50.8 billion. Mr. Speaker, domestic trading volume totaled 3 million shares in 2021 and was valued at $23.4 million. Mr. Speaker, the authority currently serves in various leadership positions at the International Association of Insurance Supervisors. Presently, the authority serves as a member of the IAIS Executive Committee, the Macroprudential Committee, as well as the Policy Development Committee. In April 2021, the authority was appointed to the chair of the IAIS Financial Crime Task Force. In addition, and the Bank for International Settlements. The authority is also a member of the Global Financial Innovation Network. Financials. Mr. Speaker's members' attention is drawn to the following highlights set out in the Statement of Accounts report. First, Mr. Speaker, net comprehensive income was $13.3 million, up from $727,000 in the previous year. Speaker, total revenue increased by 20.19%, up to $73.09 million, up from $16.81 million the previous year. The increase is mainly due to an $11.42 million increase in revenue from supervisory and licensing fees, Mr. Speaker, attributed to the growth, certainly in the insurance sector and large insurers. Mr. Speaker, expenses decreased by 0.5% to $59.79 million, down from $60.09 million in 2020. The decrease was mainly due to the $1.27 million in decreased amortization and certain intangible assets. In addition, Mr. Speaker, travel expenses were reduced, as there were significantly reduced travel. Mr. Speaker, licensing fees were $68,672,000 at the end of the year, compared with $57,243,000, of which $59 million was paid by the insurance sector. Mr. Speaker, board members are paid an annual fee of $20,000. Board subcommittee chairs are paid an annual fee of $25,000, and the chairman of the board receives an annual fee of $75,000. Mr. Speaker, the CEO's salary is set at $500,000, and this is no change, and the CEO is eligible for performance-based bonus up to 50% of base salary. Salaries for the other 12 members of the executive team range from $250,000 to $425,000 in 2021, with a performance bonus of up to 35% of the salary. Fines. Mr. Speaker, revenue from fines, penalties, and other income in 2021 also grew by $1.32 million due to increased AML fines, insurance fines, and late penalty fees. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Section 8 of the Act, with the agreement of myself as the Minister of Finance, the authority added $7.6 million of its net earnings to the general reserve of the authority. This agreement recognizes significant ongoing investment required to maintain and enhance the strong, robust, and internationally recognized regulatory program that the authority has developed and implemented. The remainder of the net revenue, $5.7 million, was repaid to the Consolidated Fund. The House is advised that the sum paid to the Consolidated Fund represents 50% of the authority's income net of total fines. Mr. Speaker, in reviewing the authority's performance, the Auditor General has issued a clean opinion. Mr. Speaker, I wish to express my sincere thanks to the board and the staff of the authority for helping to bring so much success to Bermuda. Their performance in this time deserves all of this House's appreciation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. The next statement this morning is also in your name, Mr. Premier. Would you like to present your second statement?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my statement is entitled, Keeping Our Promise to Deliver Relief to Bermuda's Taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, today in this Honorable House, I will table a bill entitled the Land Valuation and Tax Amendment Bill 2022. Mr. Speaker, in the 2022-23 budget statement, the government promised the people of Bermuda relief now and more relief to come. This year's budget contained a number of tax and fee reductions to reduce the burden on hardworking families and the people of Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the government promised to eliminate land taxes for our local care homes. The Land Valuation and Tax Amendment Bill 2022 that will be tabled today is the fulfillment of that promise. Mr. Speaker, it is a well-known fact that we are living longer, and as such, senior care and nursing homes are a critical component of our society, providing invaluable support and services for our seniors. Mr. Speaker, the pandemic has negatively impacted all sectors of the community, and our senior care homes are doing all they can to continue meeting the needs of the people they serve. The responsibility of the government is to provide relief for the most vulnerable in society, and nursing homes need our support to reduce some of their financial pressures. The relief provided by this bill will help ensure that the quality of service and support for our seniors is not compromised. Mr. Speaker, since February, this government has reduced the cost of private car license fees by 10%, reduced payroll tax for workers making less than $96,000 for the third time since taking office, saving workers almost $5,000 since 2017, rejected recent increases to increase the price of gasoline, extended the supplemental unemployment benefit, reduced telecommunications fees, extended tax relief for hotels, restaurants, bars, and clubs, extended tax relief for our local entertainers, and extended the tax breaks for new hires to boost employment in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the government of Bermuda has and will continue to find difficult balance between staying within the fiscal constraints necessary to return to a balanced budget while delivering relief to the taxpayers of this country. The government is determined to create the conditions that will provide for a people-centered economic recovery. The bill tabled today delivers on a promise made and furthers that social renewal and economic recovery, which we promise and which is so desperately needed for the people of Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. The next statement this morning, members, is in the name of the Deputy Speaker. Deputy Premier, rather. Deputy Premier, would you like to present your statement at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I am tabling the bill entitled the Electricity Amendment Act 2022, legislation that will create a regulatory sandbox for energy innovators. Mr. Speaker, sandbox is a term normally used worldwide, usually in reference to financial legislation that provides a temporary legal framework for companies to test innovative financial products. We are using the term sandbox to describe the amendments introduced to allow innovators in the energy sector, both the physical and legislative space, to carry out their development and testing of technology that would prove useful, not just to Bermuda, but also for the rest of the world, while ensuring that we do not risk the stability of the grid. Mr. Speaker, the bill is groundbreaking for Bermuda because it changes direction on previous positions of prohibiting innovators and provides opportunities for both local entrepreneurs and foreign innovators who could be attracted to do business in this sector in Bermuda. This is a first, not only for Bermuda, but also for the region. Circumstances such as the out-of-control rising cost of fuel have made these efforts even more pressing and require us to change our legislative model to attract transformative and pioneering enterprises. Energy forms the backbone support to all our industries, other industries, and itself is a sector ripe for development in our environment, particularly as we aspire to the fulfillment of the goals of the Integrated Resource Plan. Mr. Speaker, currently the Electricity Act 2016 only allows consideration for licenses to persons who can demonstrate how it uses technology that is in commercial operation in other jurisdictions. In other words, the Act explicitly excludes innovators, and at the time, for good reason. In no way should Bermuda ever risk the stability of this grid, which is rated as one of the best in the Caribbean region. Mr. Speaker, you will be aware that there are developers, including Belco, that have been seeking to develop innovative solutions for electricity generation. Because of our limited landmass, many of these solutions will have to be developed offshore in our oceans. Those solutions range from floating solar photovoltaic installations, floating offshore wind, and ocean wave technologies. Any of those innovations could be game changers for the future of electricity generation in Bermuda, if proven to be not only operationally feasible, but economically viable. These new initiatives will also attract investment and have the potential to create jobs. Mr. Speaker, the need for these amendments cannot be overemphasized. The current prohibition diminishes the ability for Bermuda to meet its renewable energy goals through the innovative application of promising technologies, which could in turn have long-term effect of delaying Bermuda's transition to a low-carbon energy future, which ultimately diminishes our resiliency in the face of climate change. Mr. Speaker, I must emphasize that this bill, though providing a test bed for new technologies, will require rigorous criteria, will still have to be met by any newcomer. Let me just repeat that. Though providing a test bed for new technologies will require that rigorous criteria will still have to be met by any newcomers. This is most assuredly not an open door through which any developer can walk. All normal requirements that are in place for developers of more tried and true technologies will still apply. The requirements for an environmental impact analysis is also included in this bill. Innovators will have to be scrutinized to ensure their credibility as investors and will have to meet a series of requirements before being allowed to connect to the grid. And provided those requirements are met, they will still have the opportunity to test their technology in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the intention of these proposed amendments is also to make the regulator the central and primary point of contact, which will set Bermuda apart from other jurisdictions that lack a clear and easily navigated path from inception to implementation. The regulatory authority will have the ability to impose conditions on the license, such as end-of-life provisions that will require the innovative developer to remove and dispose of their equipment if their explorations prove the technology inappropriate for use in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the goal is to achieve a favorable outcome. If the technology does prove to be successful, this legislation will provide an avenue for the innovation to be included as part of Bermuda's energy mix and allow the TDNR provider to purchase energy produced as a result of the innovator's testing. Mr. Speaker, these amendments will serve not only to these amendments serve not only the purposes of encouraging better energy solutions for Bermuda, but they also encourage much needed inward investment in Bermuda. The bill foreshadowed in our announcements late last year will ensure that innovators have a clear and understandable pathway to researching and developing solutions that could be game changers for Bermuda and for the world, with rigorous process that lends investors confidence while minimizing risk to Bermuda's environment and our grid. Mr. Speaker, the government of Bermuda will continue to work with the regulator in particular and the energy sector on modernizing our regulatory framework with a view to making sure that Bermuda has an energy infrastructure that is ready for the future as it rapidly evolves. Mr. Speaker, it is our goal to move Bermuda to a clean and sustainable energy future with affordable and renewable energy. This bill will assist us in achieving that goal in a measured and well-regulated fashion, increasing investor confidence and protecting our environment, our economy, and most importantly, our people. I look forward to the debate of the bill when I can go into more detail on the merits of this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Transport. Minister, would you like to present your statement?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, today marks the last day of Road Safety Week in Bermuda. On Monday, the 16th of May, 2022, at City Hall, the Bermuda Road Safety Council launched Road Safety Week from the 16th of May to the 20th of May of this year. This year's theme is Drive so that Others Survive. The Council, along with the Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service and the Bermuda Police Service, had booths available on site where information was shared to raise awareness about road safety, promote safe and responsible road use, and ultimately reduce road casualties. Mr. Speaker, throughout Road Safety Week, the Council continued to shine a light on road safety through a social media blitz and roadside signage. Beyond this week, the Council will continue public education and awareness through the Operation Caution Road Safety Strategy. Mr. Speaker, during this week, all of Bermuda is urged to take that extra moment and think about the people we share the road with, because our driving behaviors and the decisions we make while driving and riding can have fatal consequences. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to thank the Chairman, MP Dennis Lister, for his service so far, and he has our continued support as a ministry, but also to remind the public that driving responsibly and safely goes a long way in helping all road users to arrive home. And the greatest gift you can give your loved one is to come home safe. Although today is officially the last day of Road Safety Week, let's continue to drive so that others survive. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. MP, I believe that the next statement is also in your name. Would you like to present that one now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, I'm saying MP, Minister. My apologies.
No worries. Mr. Speaker, I said back in February, the future of Bermuda's visitation in 2022. Today, I will share an update on the cruise industry. Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda 2022 cruise ship season is shaping up better than originally forecast at 50% occupancy, but I officially reported the numbers during the budget debate. Mr. Speaker, since April 4th, Bermuda has received 27 cruise ship calls to date, with ships having visited all 3 ports. There have been approximately 45,600 passengers visiting our shores thus far, and ships have been sailing at occupancy levels between 60 and 75%. Mr. Speaker, the estimated revenue generated so far for government taxes is $4 million. Visitor fees is $700 $29,600. And passenger spending is $10.2 million. Mr. Speaker, it has been wonderful to have our regular cruise ship partners back after a 2-year hiatus. Mr. Speaker, business is getting back to normal and streets are bustling again. Bermuda has had a ship in port almost every day since early April, and this week, on Monday, saw 3 ships in port with 1 at anchor at dockyard. This will happen again on June 5th. Mr. Speaker, it is anticipated that come mid-June and July, ship occupancies will continue to rise, all the while cruise lines manage the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, I attended Sea Trade Cruise Global Conference in Miami on the April 25th to 27th, and the Bermuda contingency included Stacey Evans, our cruise line relation contact within the Ministry of Transport, Charles Jeffers II, CEO of Bermuda Tourism Authority, and Tashay Thompson, Director of Experience at the Bermuda Tourism Authority. We met our cruise line partners, Norwegian Cruise Line, Oceanic Cruise Line Cruises, Regent 7 Seas Cruises, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, and Carnival Cruise Line, MCS Cruises, Holland America Line, Princess Cruises, Seabourn, P&O, Ritz-Carlton Yacht Collection, Silver Sea Cruises, Disney Cruise Line, Massport, Maryland Port Administration, Global Port Holdings Limited, and the Caribbean Public Health Agency over a busy 3 days. Mr. Speaker, during the opening remarks of the State of the Cruise Industry on April 26, we learned that the cruise lines have worked tirelessly to resume service and leverage the power of partnership with governments around the world, projecting 280 cruise ships in service across 100 countries and regions in 2022. With every cruiser supporting 1 full-time job, each cruiser spending an average of 750 in port cities, 6 out of 10 cruisers return to a city first visited via a cruise. Looking ahead to the fleet of ships in 2027, 26 ships will be powered by LNG fuel, 231 ships will have advanced wastewater treatment systems, and 174 ships will have shoreside power connectivity, and 176 ships will have exhaust gas cleaning systems, showing that the cruise line is also moving towards sustainability and greener operations. Mr. Speaker, the future of cruises for Bermuda is bright. Given what we learned at Sea Trade, that 4 to 7 day itineraries are considered the industry sweet spot, and that is where Bermuda is, and that fuel is an important driver for North American home ports. Cruise partners will be looking for destinations as close to the eastern seaboard as possible. Bermuda, as a port of call, must prepare to be able to service the projected growth out of home ports such as Boston and Baltimore. This will also equate to Bermuda becoming less of a seasonal port of call and more of a year-round destination, given that if we expand our season by 1 month, we will achieve year-round port of call status. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Transport is currently reviewing a proposed MOU with a contract cruise line partner to clearly define a direct path for Bermudians 18 years and older who are interested in training and employment opportunities in the hospitality industry. And I would not be surprised if the contract cruise partner is on island prior to the end of our 2022 cruise ship season to host a job fair activity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Scott. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Education. Minister of Education, would you like to present your statement at this time?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Bermuda. Today, I rise to give my honorable colleagues and the Bermudian community an update on the History and Legacy Committee and the adoption of its terms of reference. Mr. Speaker, the History and Legacy Committee was established due to the concerns expressed by the community during the consultation on the parish primary schools. The proposal shared plans for the discontinuation of 10 primary schools to support the vision for parish primary schools that would act as the hub of the parish within its community, rallying around them. This, however, generated concerns regarding the loss of the rich history and legacies of Bermuda schools. My determination to establish this committee to document our educational histories followed extensive conversations with community members, public school alumni, and as well as current and former educators. Mr. Speaker, in December last year, I announced the initiation of the prep work for the History and Legacy Committee by the appointment of a working group, its members, and Ms. Heather Whalen as chairperson. I shared that this working group would be a small, short-term group that would develop the terms of reference and supporting deliverables in preparation for the formal establishment of the History and Legacy Committee. Mr. Speaker, in my previous update on education reform and the History and Legacy Working Group, I shared with my honorable colleagues and the public the progress the working group had undertaken in developing the terms of reference and other supporting deliverables for the foundation of the History and Legacy Committee. Mr. Speaker, today I am excited to announce that the working group was successful in submitting the terms of reference on March 31st, 2022. I have approved the terms of reference and have provisionally adopted all recommendations subject to further development and implementation. The History and Legacy Committee will thus use these terms of reference as a framework to guide and carry out longer-term work. Mr. Speaker, within the terms of reference, the working group provides the organizational structure, guiding principles, objectives, and the broad deliverables that the History and Legacy Committee would undertake. Due to the nature of the History and Legacy Committee's work, the working group proposed that the committee be constituted as a statutory board to ensure consistency and continuity as it expands and evolves with the continuation of education history. It was also recommended that the committee function as a steering committee that will oversee critical processes to invite, approve, and oversee projects to meet the outcomes of documenting, preserving, honoring, and commemorating the history and legacy for education in Bermuda. The working group noted the immense extent and complexity of Bermuda's educational history and decided it was too great for this committee to undergo this work alone, and that to the true context of this story can only be told with the help of the Bermudian community. The working group agreed that the public should make recommendations on the best way to preserve, honor, and commemorate the history and legacy of education in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, throughout the development of this monumental work, the working group met weekly and additionally as needed to discuss and complete their deliverables. Within these meetings, they carry out interviews with historians and former educators for insight into the nature of education in Bermuda during the various time periods to help determine the scope of educational history in Bermuda and how that should influence the range of areas and periods to be covered by the History and Legacy Committee. The working group also consulted with representatives from the Bermuda National Library and the Bermuda Archives on various types of written materials and artifacts within their respective collections. These collaborations played a significant part in the final recommendations for the terms of reference. Mr. Speaker, the next step towards the formulation of the History and Legacy Committee is the selection of members by the appointment of the minister. Firstly, the members of the working group will be invited to express their interest in serving on the committee, followed by members of the public. Once the History and Legacy Committee has been formally established, committee members will review and agree on internal operations as per the terms of reference, determine the scope and guidelines for various proposals, and solicit proposals from the community on the specific scope they wish to embark on first. Mr. Speaker, the success of the History and Legacy Committee is the responsibility of all Bermudians, as this is our story to tell in the way that we want to tell it and show it, and the way it will benefit us. Our community deserves to know and have access to every part of Bermuda's story, like other countries worldwide. It is my hope that through the work of the community and the History and Legacy Committee, we can tell the story of the evolution of education in Bermuda, and that it will develop and transform our confidence and belief in education delivery. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the members of the working group, Chairperson, Ms. Heather Whalen, Mr. Randy Scott, Dr. Keto Swan, Dr. Theodore Francis, Mr. Adrian Lodge, Ms. Albertha Dyer Tucker, Ms. Rhonda Wood Smith, and Ms. Tanisha Otley for their willingness and dedication in developing this underlying work. I'm also grateful to those who have made contributions by assisting the working group in the development of the terms of reference. I look forward to the formal establishment of the History and Legacy Committee later this year and the work that is to come with preserving, honoring, and commemorating Bermuda's educational history in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, I believe the next statement is also in your name. Would you like to present that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to provide an update to the House and the listening public on the tremendous amount of work that's being done within the Ministry of Education, the Department of Education, and the Learning First program. It was on March 4th that I last rose to provide an update on the ongoing work within those groups. But I'm happy to say that there is still much work taking place and great things to report about. Mr. Speaker, one of the 3 R's that form the foundation of learning in school is that, of course, arithmetic, more commonly known as math. While the methods have changed over time, their importance has not. As important as this core subject is, what we found was that our students were not performing at levels that were comparable to their peers around the world. Mr. Speaker, a solution was needed and a solution was found. In early 2018, the Department of Education was approached by some of our math teachers about a program offered through Primal Academic Innovations, or PAI. That program was piloted at one of our primary schools. The success of this year-long pilot was noted, and in 2020, the Department of Education contracted Primal Academic Innovations to deliver a phased math intervention program in the public school system. Primal Academic Innovations Limited has a strong track record of transforming schools who have been underperforming in math into becoming centers of mathematic excellence. Mr. Speaker, PAI was tasked to improve the quality of teaching mathematics through training, resources, support, and leadership development. Their work included training and coaching of teachers with low-performing classes, curriculum development, assessment of materials for standard-based grading, guidance to schools falling behind due to COVID restrictions, development of teaching resources, assessment and analysis, guidance to math teacher leaders and school principals, and monitoring student work to ensure standards increase. Mr. Speaker, the work of PAI has proven to be exactly what our system needed. From 2019 to 2020, compared to 2020-2021, the data has shown primary student outcomes have doubled and in some cases tripled. These are outcomes that this government wants to see and will continue to build on. Mr. Speaker, this math program aligns with education reform, which is to increase the academic rigor and enhance the quality of teaching practice and systematic leadership. PAI will continue its great work as the program expands into our middle schools and senior schools. Over the next 15 months, this will include monitoring, training, and writing analysis for supporting the effective delivery of the Math Mastery program, assessment analysis and curriculum modification for identifying and closing gaps in students' learning due to COVID and other disruptions, a Math Mastery summer school to equip primary 3 to middle 3 teachers with tools to close the achievement gap in math resulting from COVID, conducting a IGCSE math assessment gap analysis for all S2 students at the senior school level, development training for transitioning middle school teacher delivery to signature senior school curriculum, and delivering a cadre of strong mathematics teachers as experts in the subject knowledge and pedagogy of math associated with world-class teaching. Mr. Speaker, as we have discussed several times in this honorable House, our signature senior schools will include signature learning programs based on sectors of the economy and society. These signature learning programs will help each and every student to follow their passions, build on their talents, and achieve their career and further education aspirations. Mr. Speaker, in September 2022, incoming S1 students entering the Berkeley Institute and Cedar Bridge Academy will be educated in a way that has never been done before. I am pleased to share that the incoming S1 students will, in addition to their core curriculum, have access to signature curriculum, which is relevant to our children for Bermuda and globally. A model of teaching and learning which incorporates authentic, real-world learning experiences and meaningful projects, attentive to the differing needs of each and every child. Assessment which demonstrates that what children have done and can do, as well as what they have learned. Graduation requirements that ensure children who leave with the Bermuda Signature School diploma will have the necessary experience, skills, knowledge, values, and relationships to take up jobs or apprenticeships in their chosen profession or trade and contribute to the requirements for entry into colleges and universities. System policies, procedures, and framework that will support and sustain 21st century learning. Mr. Speaker, this has been achieved by collaboratively co-designing our future schools and a school system with teachers, students, parents, and business and community leaders, informed by research on best practices worldwide and supported by our change partner, Innovation Unit. I cannot thank those involved enough for their tireless work. Mr. Speaker, learning like I just described will require an education system with a different mindset. For those new learning models, teaching and schooling to be sustained, they will need to be nurtured and enabled by reorienting systems, policies, and procedures. In addition to working on what happens inside the school, the work streams involving principals, teachers, Department of Education officers, and partner individuals and organizations have been advancing the necessary changes to our system conditions. I now wish to highlight the work that has been advanced in just one of those those work stream teams, the work stream focused on learning partnerships. Mr. Speaker, just as our community will be successful when education is successful, our system will also be successful with the community's involvement. The Signature Learning Partnership workstream has been working diligently to foster relationships between the Department of Education and each respective business to bring real-world experiences that students will require. There's much to be gained from these partnerships, not only for students, but for teachers as well. The partnership team has described several opportunities for teachers to connect with partners through various opportunities like externships. Mr. Speaker, signature externships are professional learning opportunities for teachers to connect the classroom to workplace through explicit time spent in industry and sector environments and alongside professionals. This kind of engagement enhances not only teachers' professional development, but their ability to teach students as they can bring real-world understandings that will motivate and excite students. This, Mr. Speaker, is the kind of reimagining of education that will improve our system. Mr. Speaker, as the largest and most varied employer in Bermuda, I am pleased that the government of Bermuda has truly embraced the idea of being a signature learning partner. There is no government ministry that our signatures will not touch. There is no department that does not have something to offer our students. And I'm pleased to say that they are all motivated to provide learning opportunities for our students. Mr. Speaker, I'm excited about what these partnerships will mean for our students and the government. I wish the same level of excitement for businesses in the community. There's still time to get involved and be a partner. Whether you're a mom and pop small business or a large business with tens of thousands of employees, you can support and provide opportunities for students and or teachers. I encourage everyone to reach out to www.learningfirstbda.com to figure out how. Mr. Speaker, beyond September 2022. In April 1st, 2022, the parish primary schools and the next signature school we anticipate opening for our young people in the academic year starting in September 2023. These are Francis Patton Primary School Site, the Purvis Parish Primary School Site, the Hospitality and Tourism and Education Services Signature School at a site to be confirmed. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the work needed to open the signature schools in 2022, we will begin to work to open 2 parish primary schools and another signature school in 2023. Work will continue to be done to build upon the health and social care and financial and insurance services signature programs for S2 and S3 at the Barclay Institute, and the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, or STEM, and the Trades and Professions S2 and S3 signature learning programs at Cedar Bridge Academy. Additionally, we will expand the features of signature schooling into the core curriculum at both senior schools. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Education has established school transformation teams to participate in the design, prototyping, and implementation of new models of teaching, learning, and schooling. The school transformation teams will bring together education professionals, parents, business, and community members who are passionate about redesigning Bermuda's public schools to best prepare young people for a purposeful and thriving future. Again, I urge anyone interested in collaborating to build an improved school system for Bermuda to visit www.learningfirstbda.com and express an interest by May 24th to join a school transformation team on one of these sites. Mr. Speaker, I'd now like to speak to education reform immediate next steps. Although the last 24 months have been incredibly busy, there has been little time to rest for those involved in education reform. Across the remainder of May and June, we will induct and onboard the new school transformation teams. This will bring teachers involved in delivering the new signature learning programs together across 2 weeks for a learning and planning immersion, and continue to engage each and every teacher across the island in professional learning on the features of our new transformed system. Mr. Speaker, to enable this, the Commissioner of Education recently announced to parents and the school community that we are bringing forward the end of the school year. The last day for students will be June 24th rather than June 29th, as published in the academic calendar. This was not an easy decision to make and required the department's senior leadership team and the Ministry of Education to weigh up the advantages and disadvantages in terms of children's learning, the inconvenience to parents and families, and the longer-term vision that we have for learning. Mr. Speaker, the continued transformation of our school system is a complex and challenging undertaking that requires the engagement of each and every educator across our school system. These extra 2.5 days at the end of the term will allow our schools to work with undivided attention, ensuring that we are even more prepared for the next design and implementation phases. Mr. Speaker, we understand that this is an unexpected closure and have connected with our colleagues at the Department of Youth and Sport, who will commence their summer camps a week early and start on Monday, June 27th. Registration for camps will be online starting on May 25th. Please note that spaces at the camps, while are limited, and more information of the camps can be found inside the newsletter that was sent out by the Commissioner of Education to every family yesterday and on the Department of Youth and Sport and Recreation's website. Mr. Speaker, transforming education is no easy feat. It has required and will continue to require sacrifices from each and every one of us. I wish to thank our parents and families and teachers and leaders across the system and members of the community for their continued support and effort to improve the quality of education for our students. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, the next statement this morning, members, is in the name of the Minister of Health. Minister, would you like to present your statement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, on the 30th of January 2020, the World Health Organization declared the novel coronavirus outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. And by the 11th of March 2020, the WHO had confirmed COVID-19 as a global pandemic. At that point, health systems around the world were already beginning to grapple with thousands of severely ill patients and hundreds of extraordinarily sad deaths. To this day, many health systems continue to experience enormous pressure brought on by successive waves of the coronavirus variants such as Alpha, Beta, Delta, and Omicron. Mr. Speaker, here in Bermuda, the government took immediate steps to ensure our health system, including the island's only acute care hospital, would be capable of coping with the anticipated high levels of sick individuals and hospital admissions. Our safety measures included stay-at-home orders, remote learning, and remote working, curfews, and restrictions on group activities. The Ministry of Health's Pandemic Response Unit, the Bermuda Hospital Boards, and the island's medical profession and medical laboratories responded admirably without hesitation to support and care for more than 14,000 positive cases recorded since the beginning of the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, although we continue to contend with variants of concern, the world is in a different place than it was in early 2020. Certainly Bermuda is. As of the 14th of May, 2022, 74.4% of our population is fully vaccinated, and we are learning to live safely with COVID-19. As part of living safely with COVID involves adjusting to a new normal, including reaffirming our commitment to living a healthier life, something data suggests we have put on the back burner. Mr. Speaker, health professionals in general have noticed a reduction in the number of people seeking health care during the pandemic. A 2021 study conducted by the Urban Institute in the United States found that more than 1 in 10 adults elected to delay or not seek at least one type of care. A similar percentage of parents delayed or declined to pursue care for their children as well. The Health Foundation, based in the UK, found that 6 million so-called missing patients did not seek treatment in 2020. In Bermuda, Mr. Speaker, a decline in annual health examinations and preventative care, which reduced the risk of disease, was also evident during this current pandemic. Compared with pre-COVID fiscal year 2018-2019, Bermuda has experienced a drop in annual checkups with new patients. In the 18 to 39-year-old demographic, new patient preventative care checkups plunged on average of 24% between 2019 and 20 and 2021 and 22. For those between the ages of 40 to 64 years old, there was a 14% decline on average in new patient checkups, while 65-year-olds have remained diligent. Mr. Speaker, a slide in diligence is apparent with mammograms as well, where there was an average decrease of 7% in screenings over the same period. And this is disturbing in view of the fact that for the first time in 2020, the WHO identified breast cancer as the most common form of cancer worldwide. These are just 2 examples in Bermuda. According to the Urban Institute study, the common cause for the reluctance to seek health care is due to concerns about patients' exposure to the coronavirus, and this is understandable. However, Mr. Speaker, we must reverse the delays in seeking care that may have become normalized over the past 2 years. Young adults need to introduce themselves to annual checkups for their health and make them a habit. Children need to be up to date with their schedule of vaccinations to prevent and reduce the spread of disease. All of us benefit from preventative screening that can detect disease early when treatment can be more effective. Additionally, the Ministry of Health strongly urges those in the community with known risk factors such as obesity, heart disease, hypertension, and relevant family history to reach out to their GP or to the Hamilton Health Clinic for an appointment. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the coronavirus is still here in our community, so the concerns are real, but face masks are required in all healthcare facilities. Also, these facilities have established very stringent cleaning processes and work hard to avoid overcrowding waiting rooms. Preventative care is essential, and it is critical that we resume good health routines. Mr. Speaker, it would be extremely remiss not to recognize the impact COVID-19 has had, arguably, and a more significant impact it has had on our mental health. In a scientific brief issued in March of this year, the WHO indicated a global increase in anxiety and depression of 25%. The main driver for this has been unprecedented stress, which has never been experienced before to this degree and for this duration, along with social isolation due to the pandemic. The Mid-Atlantic Wellness Institute indicates the now prolonged nature of the pandemic has led to many challenges for the Bermuda community. In addition to the fear of being exposed to COVID-19 or the ramifications of infection, MWI has also seen some older adults experience loneliness at having reduced family contact and missing out on events and celebrations. For the frontline workers, burnout and exhaustion have become a genuine concern. Mr. Speaker, in Bermuda, many client presentations to community mental health services have been related to COVID, with anxiety or depression due to job loss or economic instability as a factor. The threat of the impact of COVID, whether health-related, economic, or simply exhaustion due to the length of the pandemic, is woven into many mental health reviews. Persons known to the mental health services required ongoing support, while some have undergone a deterioration in their pre-existing mental health issues. Mr. Speaker, members of the extended Bermuda community have lost people close to them, and having lost close loved ones and relatives, the inability to travel for funerals and memorial services was a further stressor. MWI has seen a number of inpatient admissions related to COVID-19, some with psychotic symptoms following the concentration of COVID-19, having never been involved with mental health services before, and others developing obsessional thoughts due to fear of COVID exposure. There have also been more serious cases of depression, in part due to the changes in work circumstances, loss of loved ones, or inability to pay bills. Mr. Speaker, families had to pivot, balancing work with childcare and teaching during remote learning. And for essential workers, this was particularly challenging. In particular, children have had a difficult journey, having spent significant amounts of time at home, which has doubled as a school space, with extracurricular activities and typical social interactions paused, resulting in less social contact. Social anxiety has been observed in the adolescent group, and there have been some reports of school refusals with the return to in-person classes following protracted periods of remote learning. Further, Mr. Speaker, MWI has seen high levels of inpatient admissions to the child and adolescent services with this ongoing pandemic. In 2019, there were 25 admissions to CAF. Already in 2022, there have been 39 admissions to date, perhaps reflecting a worrying trend. Mr. Speaker, discharges from inpatient care are difficult to achieve and can be drawn out, and it is acknowledged that there remains a need for a diversity of housing options within our community, and we welcome the efforts being made in this regard. The delivery of care for those with mental health disorders requires agility on the part of MWI due to the inability to safely complete face-to-face interviews as a result of the pandemic disaster alert levels within the Bermuda Hospitals Board. Not all patients requiring support had access to digital means to allow for virtual reviews. Nevertheless, MWI continued to be responsive to high acuity situations and be flexible depending on their need, and for that, the MW team must be commended. Mr. Speaker, more recently, MWI has shifted back to more typical face-to-face reviews with the development of BHB's integration initiatives, which include satellite clinics being held at the Lamfogle Urgent Care Center as part of the Integrated Healthcare Clinic, as well as the Hamilton Health Clinic on Victoria Street. And these are examples of providing care closer to home and continuing work to lessen the stigma associated with mental health and enhance access to care. Mr. Speaker, BHB has supported the development of the MWI Directorate Plan, which reflects a commitment to mental health. Globally, there's a shared concern about mental health among mental health professionals that the tidal wave for mental health may be coming with unknown endpoints due to the pandemic. There's a continued need to be flexible and incorporate care tailored to specific needs, as each individual's journey over this extraordinarily time is difficult. So how do we manage mental health during this ongoing pandemic? There's a directory of service providers available to assist, Mr. Speaker, at helpingservices.bm/directory, which can be used for general health and also filtered for health mental. As WHO has stated, no health without mental health. Therefore, it is vitally important that we value ourselves and prioritize self-care. Mr. Speaker, with that in mind, MWI offers these tips for all of us to follow now. First of all, be gentle with yourself. We have been living through unprecedented times, and there's no right way to respond to the stresses we have been facing. Experiencing a degree of anxiety is normal. Take a break from the news. We can sometimes feel bombarded by negative news and images, so disconnecting and doing something else can be a good distraction. Reconnect with previous interests to instill a degree of normalcy. Take care of yourself. Try to eat a balanced, healthy diet, exercise, lessen your alcohol intake, and avoid alcohol and other substances as a go-to if you're feeling stressed. Prioritize sleep. Try to maintain connections with others, including family and friends. Focus on what you can control instead of worrying excessively over things you cannot control, and avoid spending too much time on social media. Practicing mindfulness can be beneficial, and this can be a simple addition to your day. Practice gratitude. Pause and reflect on what we remain grateful for, along with reminding ourselves what might be going well despite the pandemic. And take things at your own pace. What works for some may not work for others. And finally, Mr. Speaker, take a look around. We are living on an island of exceptional beauty. Absorbing the vibrant colors of the ocean and getting out into nature can be very restorative for our mental health. Reflecting on the journey that we have been on, let us be kinder to ourselves and to one another, because it can positively impact our own mental health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of National Security. Minister, would you like to present your statement?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues, and good morning to Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to invite honorable members and the wider Bermuda community to partner with me and the gang violence reduction team as we continue the work to eradicate the senseless violence that has become all too common on our island. Mr. Speaker, since taking up the role of Minister of National Security at the beginning of April, addressing violence in our community has been my highest priority. Not more than 48 hours after my appointment, I found myself performing the grim task of offering condolences to two families who are now dealing with the grief of losing young sons to gun violence. On that occasion, I expressed that the issue of gang violence and antisocial behavior is one for all of us to tackle. It has been said before, and it warrants repeating. Eradication of violent crime in Bermuda requires us to work together as a community. We will not police our way out of this. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will recall that the first identified gang-related murder occurred in 2001. 2 years later, in 2003, Bermuda was shocked by the occurrence of the first gang-related murder that involved the use of a firearm. Since 2001, we have had 71 murders in Bermuda where a weapon has been used. Mr. Speaker, I will pause here for a moment to allow that number to sink in. 71 murders in just over 20 years. Mr. Speaker, this included 43 murders involving a firearm and 20 involving a knife. There have been 58 persons charged before the courts in relation to these 71 murders. Mr. Speaker, during this period, we have had 294 confirmed firearm incidents. Our generation, a time not long ago, Mr. Speaker, when a single murder would shock the island and we struggled to comprehend it. We now have a generation who believe the level of violence today is normal, where a gunman can walk into a family restaurant and execute 2 people in cold blood. Mr. Speaker, this year, we have already seen the lives of 4 men lost to violence. These numbers do not even begin to include the dozens of violent crime occurrences that have resulted in public disturbances and injury. Mr. Speaker, to state it simply, these are sobering statistics of the level of violence in our community. It is important to note that this is not just a gang problem, but an issue where it is becoming commonplace to resolve issues with violence. We cannot allow this senseless cycle of violence to continue. To this end, I have undertaken to meet with all relevant stakeholders, including government ministries and departments, local charities and grassroots organizations, and the private sector in order to renew our joint efforts. There are often murmurs from the community that suggest that more or better policing could solve the violence problem overnight. However, the fact remains that Bermuda cannot simply police, arrest, and incarcerate its way out of the violence problem. Mr. Speaker, this is not to say that policing is not important. In fact, I have met with the Bermuda Police Service to ensure that the Ministry of National Security is doing all that it can to support the BPS's enforcement and prevention operations. This includes conversations about manpower and other resources that are needed. Additionally, our partners at the Ministry of Legal Affairs have ensured that Bermuda's Criminal Code Act 1907, the Proceeds of Crime Act 1997, and Firearms Act 1973, and the Misuse of Drugs Act 1972 provide offenses and strong penalties for criminal activity, including increased penalties for unlawful gang activity within increased penalty zones surrounding our schools and community centers. It has been robust policing and prosecution that have led to the successful convictions of perpetrators of some of our most violent crimes. Mr. Speaker, the BPS has implemented a gang violence reduction strategy with a core focus on partnership. It consists of 3 pillars: prevention, which is education and awareness; catch and convict, which is police-focused, targeting and suppression; and resettlement and rehabilitation. That's a collaboration between community partners. Mr. Speaker, the strategy of prevent and deter is to stop young offenders escalating into prolific offenders and to prevent children and young people from becoming involved in criminality in the first place. Mr. Speaker, with Catch and Convict, the BPS deploys a police support unit and a gang targeting unit that are primarily focused on disruption and enforcement activity, specifically as it relates to those involved with gangs. Further, the approach with our partners is to focus on the same key groups of offenders who are causing the most crime. Mr. Speaker, with Rehabilitate and Resettle, the BPS chairs the multi-agency offender management team that provides ongoing assessment and supervision for high-risk offenders in an effort to encourage effective rehabilitation and resettlement of persons leaving prison services. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will be aware that the Gang Violence Reduction Team was formed in October 2017 as the part of the government's response to the surge in gang violence. Since its inception, the Gang Violence Reduction Team has directly supported hundreds of young men and at-risk youth through various programs in the community and in our public schools, as has been shared in previous ministerial statements. Following any incidents of violent injury or death, the Gang Violence Reduction Team's coordinated crisis response team continues to be available to de-escalate tensions and reduce the likelihood of immediate retaliation. Mr. Speaker, my predecessor spoke in detail in her budget brief to this Honorable House about the programs of the Gang Violence Reduction Team, and in particular, the number of individuals that the team has worked with, from school children through to adults. Mr. Speaker, it is difficult to quantify and qualify the work of the Gang Violence Reduction Team, as the measuring stick of success is the number of lives saved. But even one life lost bears more weight than all of us or all of the lives saved. Nevertheless, the Gang Violence Reduction Team continues to make inroads in the community, which are making a meaningful difference in the lives of the young people the team supports. Mr. Speaker, I am briefed weekly by the Bermuda Police Command and separately by Bishop Bean on issues of antisocial behavior and violence in our community, as well as progress on programs to mitigate this behavior. Mr. Speaker, I am encouraged by the engagement and professionalism of both the Bermuda Police Service and the Gang Violence Reduction Team. It is unfortunate that some have politicized the issue and are publicly critical of Bishop Bean and his team. I have every confidence in Bishop Bean and his team and want to thank them for their dedication and recognize them for the important work that they do every day. Yes, Mr. Speaker, every day. These issues and incidents don't stop on weekends or public holidays. Mr. Speaker, the efforts of the BPS in enforcement, the criminal justice system in prosecution, and the Gang Violence Reduction Team in de-escalation and prevention can only be strengthened by the community's efforts in proactive prevention. The young men and now even young women who are involved are at risk for involvement with antisocial behavior. Each have talents and skills that will be better suited to making positive contributions to the community. It is the duty of each of us to ensure that all young people, and especially our at-risk youth, are provided with an abundance of opportunities to discover and hone these skills so that antisocial behavior and gang activity loses its appeal. Mr. Speaker, in order to successfully eradicate violence in our community, we must collectively address the socio-economic root causes. The work will involve difficult introspection. We will need to investigate how the actions, and in some cases, lack of action, of responsible citizens have contributed to the cancerous growth of violence in our community. Mr. Speaker, each of us has a role to play. Parents and families must work to rebuild strong family support units. Fathers need to step up and take responsibility. Community organizations must develop programs that support young people and help them to develop a love and respect for the communities they occupy. The private sector must utilize its depth of resources to assist community organizations in their mission. Each of us must determine how we can individually and collectively contribute to the common goal of stopping the cycle of violence. This includes assisting the police. If you know something, say something. This can be done anonymously. Silence is an enabler to those that commit violent acts. Mr. Speaker, there is no easy solution to this problem. It is not something that we can just throw money at in the hopes that it will disappear. Simply talking about the problem will also not suffice. I am calling on honorable members here and in the other place to join hands in a bipartisan approach to firmly standing against gang violence and other community violence. I will shortly be inviting you to attend roundtable discussions on our plan for the way forward and how we as a community must address this. We need input and action from all of our leaders and activists if we hope to make any progress. I am confident that with consistent and united efforts, we can return Bermuda to a place of strong social ties and community support where violence is not the norm. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement, which is the last statement this morning, is from the Minister of Public Works. Minister, would you like to present your statement at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. I'm pleased to provide an update to this Honourable House on the progress of the St. George's Marina Development Project. Mr. Speaker, colleagues might recall in November last year, the then Acting Minister of Public Works announced the details of the leasing arrangement between the Corporation of St. George's and the developer of the marina through a public-private partnership. The Acting Minister further laid out what will be included in the marina. For clarity, I'd like to reiterate what is actually being developed under this project. The arrangement will see the corporation leasing land to the developer for 21 years less a day and a sharing of the gross proceeds of the marina revenue. The new marina will comprise of an improved and designated dock area for visiting yachts, a newly repaired dock on the south side of Ordnance Island, 650 linear feet of dockage for smaller yachts, 10 stern to berths for super yachts with mooring systems, a marina reception, lounge, food and beverage and internet cafe, a duty-free fuel dock, and the installation of sewage pumping services. Mr. Speaker, it was announced that the government and Corporation of St. George jointly engaged the services of structural engineers Brunel Limited for the purpose of renovating the existing wharf located on Ordnance Island. The cost of this endeavor was estimated at $2.7 million and was scheduled to be completed by June 2022. However, Mr. Speaker, Brunel has been consulting with various entities to bring this project to fruition and has advised that the original estimates have now increased to a total of $4.12 million. The value of the bid submitted is significantly in excess of the original project estimate. As a result, Brunel entered into detailed discussions with the bidder to determine if there were allowances or other unknown risk items within the scheme that might be eliminated to reduce costs. Through this process, they have received a revised bid for the works of $3,045,511. Savings were achieved in the general items, marine works, and most significantly in the precast concrete works section of the pricing document. In addition, Brunel have reviewed the increase in the project budget and the design development subsequent to the original project estimate. Original project budget estimate was for $2.75 million. This comprises construction costs of $2,321,000, additional $427,000 for contingency and construction management fees. Brunel recommends the revised project budget should be increased to $4,115,000. This revised budget includes the following: tendered construction costs in the amount of $3,045,511, contingency and construction management fees, contingency maintained at 10% in the amount of $465,000, current expenditure on advance purchase and transporting of materials in the amount of $600,000. The budgetary increase is significant and reflects both the current inflationary price cycle and the increase in construction work content of the project through design development. The current inflationary pressures have significantly increased material and shipping costs across the board. As a result of these changes, the scheduled completion date of June 2022 has now been extended to an anticipated completion date of December 2022. Construction is set to begin in July. Mr. Speaker, whilst this is not ideal, I am sure members of this Honourable House can all agree that this marina, when completed, will contribute to the economic renaissance happening within the former capital, along with the newly constructed St. Regis Hotel and a number of new initiatives such as the recent return of the St. George's Marine Expo. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the team working on the strategic plan for the town have been making good progress with their consultation with stakeholders and meeting regularly to develop ideas. They are due to give a status report to the ministry next week and will soon be holding public consultations on the plan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, that brings us to a close of the statements for this morning. We'll now move on to the next item on the order paper this morning, is the report of committees. There are none. That now takes us to the question period. And members, as you know, we have 60 minutes for that. And the clock is now at 11:23. And members, we'll start with the written questions. We have written questions this morning from the two sets of written questions. The first is from the opposition leader. Opposition leader, would you like to put your questions that you have down for the Minister of Works? You have three questions. They all indicate oral response.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll give the questions now. At the meeting of the House of Assembly on May 21st, 2021, the Honourable Minister gave this Honourable House an assurance that a final decision will be made to remediate the high accident spot at the corner of Zul's Park Road and South Shore Road before June 30th, 2021. Can the Honourable Minister confirm if a final option has been selected and what are the details?
Thank you. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the final option has been selected and partially implemented. The details of which are as follows. You will recall I mentioned a number of possible solutions, some of them requiring the cooperation of the landowner. Unfortunately, agreements couldn't be reached with the landowner, resulting in a resetting of the process. MPW installed 4 sets of rumble strips on South Road to force traffic coming from the west to slow down. The cars sitting at the turning lane on Zul's Park Road observing traffic coming from the west. The wall is the main issue and blocks the view. Sight line is only 30 feet visibility. The newly installed rumble strips coming down the hill a set of 35 each, have proven tremendously successful. In addition, MPW shifted the turning lane on Zul's Park Road over to the east, installed island stripping along the west wall, installed 2 mirrors across the road so motorists could see west oncoming traffic from the wall side, and installed an additional mirror to see east oncoming traffic from the fence side. Sitting in the car on Zul's Park Road looking into those mirrors, across the junction it shows oncoming traffic from the west, circular mirror and rectangular mirror on opposite poles, and it shows oncoming traffic from the east, circular mirror at the bottom under the rectangular one. Then just also move the stop bar forward about 12 inches. The wall height on South Shore Road and Hedge, or near the Belco pole from the asphalt layer up to the wall height, is already 27 inches before the property elevation starts. As to take into consideration the height of the wall on South Road, it determines the height of the property and the height of the hedge. Together, the height of the wall from the bottom of South Road and hedge is approximately 61 inches. This is the real problem for the view to the east from Zul's Park Road, where the height of the hedge should be 36 inches. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Officer, do you have any supplementaries?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Hey, any supplementary from any other member? There are none. Would you like to put your second question?
In an effort to meet his statutory duty, will the Honorable Minister please confirm for this Honorable House when the final remediation option will be implemented and completed?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the one outstanding item is the hedge east of Zul's Park Road. There appears to be a long-standing dispute between the landowner and some of the residents of Zul's Park Road that has led to a lack of cooperation. We are seeking legal advice from the Attorney General regarding our legal ability to enforce restrictions on the hedge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Any supplementaries?
No, thank you.
None? Would you like to put your third question?
Once the final remediation option has been chosen and completed, will the Honorable Minister please confirm for this Honorable House that his ministry has met its statutory duty to ensure road safety?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, yes, once the final remediation option has been chosen and completed, I will confirm to this Honorable House that the ministry has met its statutory duty to ensure road safety. We trust that in the long term, the data will show that the traffic calming measures we have already put in place have met this duty, as a large part of the issue was the speed in which vehicles approached the intersection from the west. Again, this comes down to human behavior, speeding on our roads, not that many of us will find hard to crack. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Any supplementaries?
No, thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to a conclusion of the first written questions this morning. The second written questions are a set of questions from MP Jackson to the Minister of Transport. MP Jackson, would you like to put your questions at this time? And again, it's 3 questions that have indicated an all response.
Yes. Good morning.
2 questions. I'm sorry.
2 questions. Yeah. Thank you. Good morning, and good morning, Minister. Mr. Speaker, will the Honorable Minister please inform this Honorable House the electric bus battery life expectancy and the cost to replace each battery?
Sir?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the electric bus drive batteries have an 8-year warranty, and the replacement cost for 6 drive batteries is $44,000 per bus.
Supplementary? Hey, Barton? None?
Yes, I do have a supplementary.
Okay, supplementary.
Yes, given the 8-year life expectancy of the batteries, does the minister know of any circumstances where the battery life can be preserved, or in circumstances where the battery life may be reduced?
Minister?
No, not aware of any circumstance on either side.
Thank you.
Any other supplementaries?
There's one other supplementary.
Okay, put your seconds on.
I did listen to the news last night, but I was just wondering if the minister might be able to give us any indication of things that are being put in place to mitigate the risks of any batteries overheating or any battery fires. I know that the fire station, and there's been lots of training should a fire occur, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that we're doing to mitigate or reduce the likelihood of any risks through batteries overheating or any other issue that would cause a fire.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, all of the mitigating circumstances are in the public domain, but just to reiterate, making sure the training is there is why the manufacturer is on island, or what has been on island since we took delivery, to make sure that all training and all circumstances and all mitigating risks, all mitigating factors are in place and properly in place to ensure the safe operation and maintenance of the buses.
I have supplemental, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, yes. Opposition leader?
While on that point, can the minister confirm that he has a maintenance program in place and a manual supporting the maintenance program, and that he has the resources for the maintenance program for these new buses?
Minister?
This is all, once again, in the public domain. The manufacturer has provided the manuals and the training of the local staff to ensure that everything is within compliance. That's why the manufacturer is here on island and has been on island for the last few months, ensuring that all mitigating factors, all procedures and policies are followed and properly implemented.
Supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, because he hasn't answered my question. This about the second part of my question, sorry. And that is, does he have the resources, the financial resources, to ensure that the maintenance of these buses is ongoing? Because historically there weren't resources for the maintenance.
Thank you. Minister?
The simple answer is yes. It is part of the budgetary process, and we do ensure that we budget to make sure that we have proper maintenance of our fleet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supplementary from anyone else?
Yes, one final supplementary.
Yes.
So, given the months of maintenance, checking, and training, have any of the buses required any special accommodation to keep the batteries safe, given our hilly landscape and the heat and other circumstances that might be unique to Bermuda? So, any additional fan systems to keep the engine cool, that kind of thing. Have any accommodations had to be made?
Minister?
The simple answer is no. There have been no need to change anything. The buses are as is. The only real modifications would be to add more buzzers or bells in the for those passengers in the back.
Thank you. Anyone else with a supplementary? None for that. Minister, Madam MP Jackson, would you like to put your second question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Honorable Minister please inform this Honorable House the status of the permanent charging station infrastructure project, timeline to completion, locations, and costs?
Minister?
Long-term electrical charging infrastructure at Fort Langton Bus Depot commenced in April of 2022 and will take 7 months to complete at a cost of $2,253,252.
Supplementary?
No, I do not have a. What about the timeline to complete it?
That was in the second part of the answer. Will take 7 months to complete.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's all I have.
Thank you. Members, that brings us to a close of the written questions for this morning. We'll now move on to the statements that was given this morning by ministers. And the first statement this morning was from the Premier in reference to the Monetary Authority's annual report. And, excuse me, the opposition leader would like to put a question to you. Opposition leader?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On page 4 of the statement, insurance sector, the Minister of Finance indicated that the number of insurance companies reduced to 1,158 from 1,193 in 2020, and a similar reduction in insurers registered, 3 reductions. Can the minister provide more details on why these numbers have declined?
Mr. Speaker, I cannot provide details on why the numbers declined. There are certainly transitions, but I think what's most important to recognize is that the quality and size of insurers that are on our register are increasing. And so we see in license fees this year, which were up over $11 million from year to year. And this increase in line with the number of registered entities, but more specifically of the 64 insurance entities licensed in 2021, 19 of those were commercial insurers and added to the BMA's register, as well as the growth in size of existing classes. And so it's not, I'm not entirely certain what's being looked at specific numbers, but I think it's important to note that the size of the insurers that are coming into the market are significant.
I don't.
Supplementary?
I don't disagree with what the Premier has said.
How about a supplementary?
And so the question, my question still remains. If we know why the numbers reduced, then we can possibly determine what remedy we have if it has to do with the jurisdiction. And the minister did indicate that he did not know the reasoning.
No supplementary?
Not on that one. I'll go to my second question.
What's your second question?
On page 6, the minister said the authority currently serves in various leadership positions at the International Association of Insurance Supervisors. Can the minister confirm whether the BMA has initiated any investigations in Bermuda because of requests made by international regulatory bodies or international association of insurance supervisors?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I do not have an answer to that question. And if the minister, or if the opposition leader wishes to send it over in writing or pose it as an actual question, I'll make sure that an answer is provided.
Okay, those are my 2 questions.
Those are your 2 questions? No further questions?
I have a supplemental, but he doesn't know the answer. The Premier doesn't know the answer, so I will.
He said he'll provide it for you at a later stage.
That's right.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Premier, that's the only question for your first statement. For your second statement, the MP Jackson would like to put a question to you in reference to Bermuda tax relief. MP Jackson would like to put your question now.
Yes, just a couple of quick questions, and good morning, Premier. One is that I'm interested in finding out whether the land tax exemption for rest homes and nursing homes, is this going to be on a permanent basis? Or is this for this tax year?
Mr. Speaker, the amendments are not temporary. They're permanent.
Thank you.
Yeah, supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Speaker. Yes, and if the Premier might be able to just tell us how many homes does this affect? And what are the projected savings overall?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to revert with that information to the Shadow Minister, and certainly we can discuss that during the debate.
How about even just roughly?
I would say that it would have, well, I can just state, sorry, I'll wait for you to acknowledge, Mr. Speaker.
I'm sorry.
And Premier?
Mr. Speaker, it would apply to every single residential care nursing home that currently pays land tax. And I am aware that there's only one residential care home that does not pay land tax, and that is Westmeath, because they were given a special law in 1975 to not pay land tax. But I would say that it applies to all other residential care homes that are currently paying land tax.
Thank you. Any supplementary?
Yeah, just to ask again, if we have a projected total amount of savings to the nursing homes, overall, if we know about how much the nursing homes that will get this relief altogether, do we have a dollar amount of what the actual savings will be cumulative?
Mr. Speaker, I'll refer to the answer I gave earlier, and I'll be happy to share that information with the honorable member during the debate on this bill in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further supplementary, or would you like to put a third question?
No further supplement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Okay, Premier, that's it for questions for you on your two statements. Thank you. And I'll move on, members, to the next statement, which is from the Deputy Premier in reference to the tabling amendment for the Electricity Act. Minister, you have a question from MP Pearman. MP Pearman, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, on the second page of the statement, you identified potential solutions ranging from floating solar installations, floating offshore wind, and ocean wave technologies. How would these solutions fit in with the regulator's integrated resource plan?
Minister?
Thank you for the question. Such solutions would need to be presented to the regulator, and subject to a exhaustive review, it will be determined how they may fit to the integrated resource plan. But there will be a process from the regulator to do that. At the moment, it is very clear that on-island solutions are limited, and that our ocean presents greater opportunity for the different options that might in the future come to us. So that is how this process will go. The regulator will govern it and determine which solutions can best fit the Bermuda circumstance.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Minister. The third of the solutions just mentioned was the ocean wave technology. I assume that this is connected with the wave power farm that you made the announcement about in November, December of last year. Can you update us on how that's progressing? That was the sea-based company's proposal.
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As was announced publicly, an MOU has been signed with them. They are going through their own processes under the direction of the regulator, and nothing in reference to their approval will move forward until such time as this legislation is passed. So the only thing that exists now is that there's an MOU, and until this bill is hopefully passed through the legislature, then the official process of consideration of their technology will then commence. There are a number of pieces that have already been identified as to where such technology can be deployed, and some of the other environmental considerations have already been done with consultation with the government and the Department of the Environment, but no official application has been made by this particular entity until such time as the legislation provides the authority or the capacity to do so.
Thank you. Second question, Mr. Speaker.
Second question, yes.
Thank you, Minister. At page 3 of your statement, you say the intention of these proposed amendments is to make the regulator the central and primary point of contact. Why why is the BDA being bypassed, and if so, why is the BDA being bypassed as the central point of contact?
Understand?
The Regulatory Authority of Bermuda is the regulator for the energy sector in Bermuda. They are the point of contact for anything in relation to energy.
Supplementary,
yes.
So will the BDA be involved in these new business inquiries or not?
A applicant might go through the BDA, but the BDA would refer, if it's an energy related submission, to the Regulatory Authority of Bermuda.
Second supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
I mean, Minister, doesn't that put the regulator in a position of conflict, being both the promoter of a concept and the arbiter that decides whether it should be permitted?
I disagree, because the law specifically outlines the role of the regulator. It is the IRP is the document which the IRP and government policy has been the sort of, I guess, articulator of what the country's intentions are around energy. Anybody can come and promote a renewable energy concept to Bermuda, but it must go through the appropriate scrutiny by the independent regulator. I don't see any conflict for them being the promoter of what is clearly articulated as what the country's intentions are. It is their responsibility to be that, not only to be the sort of like promoter, and if one goes to the Electricity Act and the Regulatory Act, that is their statutory responsibility, is to promote clean and renewable options for the country. So they're not playing a conflict role. It is what the law requires of it. It's their responsibility to do so under the law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was my second
question.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, no problem. Dear Premier, that's the only member who indicated questions for you for today. So thank you both for your participation. The next statement that has questions this morning is a statement from the Minister of Transport in reference to the update on the cruise ships. The first question is from the opposition leader. Opposition leader, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On page 2, the minister indicated that he attended Sea Trade Cruise Global Conference. It's my understanding that a number of our cruise ship partners are having challenges with the travel authorization form process. Can the minister share with this House the concerns raised by our cruise ship partners in regards to our travel authorization process?
Minister?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the cruise ship partners raised that they felt as though the travel authorization was hindering the flow of passengers getting onto or embarking onto the ships. Once again, it has to be pointed out, and to be objective and to be fair, as that this is not a issue that is solely happening to Bermuda-based customers or customers getting on ships going to Bermuda solely. And so basically they just wanted to see if there was a way that we could refine the process. And that is something that the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Health are working together on to try to refine the process. So far, we have not had any additional complaints as recent as this a few days ago.
Supplemental?
Yes.
What commitment did the minister make to our cruise ship partners, and when did he intend to have this issue resolved?
Minister?
The commitment that was made is that we would review the process and see if there was ways to streamline, and there was no timeline or time frame given.
Okay. Supplementary?
Thank you. And when do you anticipate getting back to our cruise ship partners with a update, or how regular will you provide them with an update?
Minister?
We are already in discussions with on alternatives and updates, but once again, nothing has been confirmed.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any further questions? Okay. Minister, you also have questions this morning from MP Jackson. MP Jackson, would you like to put your question up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a supplementary that I wanted to get on the back of MP Simons. Is that allowed?
Okay, you couldn't tie it into your question?
I'll see what I can do. Good morning, Minister. I'm just looking on page 1 where it has said that so far we have generated $4 million in government taxes. I'm just wondering what the projected revenue is expected for the 22-23 season.
Minister?
Projected would be based off of the new refined the new projections after coming from C-Trade, based off of the 85% occupancy versus the 50% occupancy. We are looking at roughly $20 to $30 million in government taxes and fees.
Thank you.
Supplementary?
No supplementary.
Second question?
Second question, let me see if I can tie in here. Minister, there was just on page 2, you've just talked about the up to, the average or, a report that $750 is spent by cruise ship passengers once they get on land at the destination. I'm just curious, there are a number of reports that cruise ship passengers are being kept on board because of the travel authorization conflicts and things not happening. So those passengers are not getting off the ship. And I'm just wondering if you have any statistics on the numbers of passengers that have been refused debarkation in Bermuda.
Minister?
The Ministry of Transport is not aware of any customers that have been refused disembarkation for the entire time that the ship has been in Bermuda.
Supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So does that mean then that once there's an issue with the travel authorization form, that the Ministry of Health is sorting it out quickly so that people can then disembark?
Minister?
I think it would be helpful to note that the Ministry of Health has persons that are on board some of these ships to make sure that the travel authorization process is completed accurately and that any issues are resolved as quickly as practical.
Thank you.
Supplementary?
I have a third question.
Third question, yes.
Thank you. Minister, on the second page, there was some discussion about the possibility of some home porting and being able to support the concept of having a longer period of cruise ships coming to Bermuda. I'm just wondering what that would entail. Would we have to create any sort of infrastructure to support any kind of home porting or any other utilities that cruise ships might require?
Minister?
No, there would be no additional infrastructure needed. We have already come up with and created the home porting template, which we saw was successful in 2021. And the home porting concept that was spoken about discussed with our cruise partners was focused more on the legacy, the luxury brands, which are smaller cruise ships, i.e. the Seven Seas brand that is currently in the port of St. George's Harbor right now. So therefore, we have the infrastructure in place. It is now just trying to work on strengthening our relationships to just make sure that we can see if we can get home porting once again. As I mentioned during the budget debate, we are estimating and currently have on the schedule one home porting poll in 2023-2024 with the Ritz-Carlton Yacht Collection.
Supplementary?
Yes, just a quick one. Minister, so if we do get some of the home porting, I noticed in this statement, it does talk about things like fuel being an issue or a resource that would be important to home porting. So would we have to build or accommodate any kind of fueling depots or infrastructure in order to be able to replenish and refuel the cruise ships that are home porting?
Understood?
The Ministry of Transport is not aware of any additional fueling infrastructure that would be needed to accommodate the home porting model, which we are in discussions with.
Okay, supplementary?
Yes, I have a supplementary.
Opposition leader, it's a supplementary.
Will those ships be allowed to have tax concessions on the fuel?
Minister?
Tax concessions is not a matter that comes under the remit of the Ministry of Transport. Tax concessions would be under the Ministry of the Minister of Finance.
Further supplementary?
Yes. The Minister of Finance would take a recommendation from the Minister of Transport. And so will he make a recommendation that a concession be made for the fuel for these ships so that we are competitive?
Minister?
There has been no request for any type of concessions from any of our cruise partners, so therefore no recommendation is coming from the Ministry of Transport to the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you. Anyone else have a supplementary? No further?
Mr. Speaker, I had sent you a note. I had questions on.
Yeah, I'm still dealing with this one yet.
Okay, thank you.
Finish that. Any other supplementaries for this set of questions? None? We'll move on. Minister, you still have other members who wish questions to be asked. The next is from MP Tyrrell. MP Tyrrell, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Minister, I want to refer to your last paragraph in your statement, Cruise Industry Update. And if I could just read briefly, reviewing a proposed MOU with a contract cruise line partner to clearly define a direct path for Bermudians 18 years and older who are interested in training and employment opportunities in the hospitality industry. My question is, I'd be interested, what job opportunities would there be and in what fields?
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are approximately 26 different fields under the Marine section. There is junior seaman, junior engineer man, assistant electrician, assistant refrigeration engineer, assistant repairman, plumber or welder, assistant carpenter, assistant upholsterer. Under the operations, there's laundry attendants, galley stewards, entry-level cold galley, entry-level hot galley, entry-level butchers, entry-level pastry or bakers, restaurant attendants, assistant waiters, bar utility, bar waiters, bartenders, storekeepers, public area attendants, cabin stewards, cruise staff, youth staff, sports staff. Under specialty positions, there are casinos, culinary, housekeeping, beverage, cruise staff, and photo manager, photographer, studio artist. Mr. Speaker, I think you might be muted.
I'm sorry. Supplementaries?
Okay, Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Okay. No, MP Dunkley, would you like to put your questions?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to you and colleagues. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister mentioned in a reply to my Honorable colleague, Ms. Jackson, that the Ministry of Health had some staff on ships. Can the Minister confirm if they're on all the cruise ship or selected cruise ships to Bermuda?
Minister?
They are not on all cruise ships. They are on most of the repeat calls. So more so on our contract partners.
Supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So, supplementary question to that. The Honorable Minister said that he was not aware of any cruises being impacted by not receiving a timely TA and thus not having their passengers disembark in Bermuda. Is the Honorable Minister aware that cruise ships have had issues with obtaining TA approvals in a timely fashion for Bermuda?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the impact would be from cruise passengers that had not applied for a TA earlier. They were only just initiating their TA application once they arrived at port.
Supplementary?
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Yes, is the Honorable Minister aware of one cruise line circulated a letter to their cruise passengers on the way to Bermuda identifying the issues and the potential for them not to be allowed to disembark because the TA wouldn't be approved in time?
Minister?
The ministry is aware of that situation, but what the member might not be aware of, that communication came after that cruise identified that the ministers that the MP is talking about had identified their shortcoming in communicating the accurate and factual mood and policy of the country to get in, which resulted in a previous cruise having delays.
Supplementary? Oh, that was your second supplementary already. Would you like to put a second question?
No, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Minister, that brings you to a close of questions for your statement this morning. Thank you, members, for participating. We'll now move on. The next statement that has questions this morning is a statement from the Minister of Education on the Beyond September 22. The first question this morning is from the opposition leader. Opposition leader, would you like to put your question?
Thank you. I just have one simple question. On page 2, Minister, you say that the work of PAI has proven to be exactly what our system needed. From 2019 to 2020, compared to 2020-21, the data has shown primary student outcomes have doubled and in some cases tripled. Can you define what he means by outcomes? Are they exam results? Are they increasing grades? Just can you put some more meat on the definition of outcomes so that we can hold on to something that's really tangible? Thank you.
Here, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, opposition leader. And on page 2 of the statement, we've also included a graph that actually shows exactly what we're referring to. What was taken was a summative assessment of all students, starting from P1 through P6. And then a summative assessment was taken of the students in the following year after the immersion into the program. And the graph simply shows exactly what we're referring to. And I'm looking at the graph now. In P2, the P2, which would have been in P1 when they were first assessed, only 20% were achieving. But after the immersion of the program, it looks as if the achievement standard of the students had tripled, and over 60% were achieving. And so that's the baseline. So what the program does, it takes a baseline of where the students are at the beginning of the year, and then measures a baseline of where they are at the end of the year to show, and that is used to show how much they've acquired from using the program. So I was hoping, I knew that question would be asked, so I asked for that graph to be put in there because it's much easier looking at it from a graphical standpoint than actually hearing it.
Thank you. That was my only question.
No supplementary? No supplementary from anyone? None? Okay. Minister, you have a question indicated from MP Jackson. MP Jackson, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Minister. My question is around the Primal Academic Innovation Limited. I was just wondering if you might introduce us to them. I'm just wondering whether the listening public would like to know who they are and what a little bit about other school districts that they've worked in? Who the principals are?
And thank you for that question. Mr. Speaker, if I could answer.
Go right ahead.
MP Jackson, I would encourage listening audience and yourself to visit the Ministry of Education's Facebook page as well as the CITV Facebook page. Every 2 weeks, I conduct an online show called Education Connection. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, we featured PAI on that program, and it actually gives a good bit of information. And in one of the few times you may hear me say this, there's a story in the Royal Gazette that was published today that actually covered that particular session where we talked about PAI and the things that they're doing. We had teachers on throughout the system talking about how they've improved and how they've seen the differences in their students. And I believe you'll glean a lot of the information you just asked by if you viewed that particular program. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and send the link. I know how to contact you, so you can actually take a look at that. But this program has been around for some time, as I stated. As I stated in previous announcements about it, it was a pilot program that was sponsored by the Centennial Function of Bank of Bermuda at the Harrington Sound School. And once it went through that pilot program, we saw the results that we were getting, and we've inputted them and we've contracted them, and we've seen the results at the primary level. So we've now moved into the middle school, we've moved into the senior school, and I think I cannot do it as much justice as the teachers and the educators that were on the program talking about how they've implemented it and how it is showing tremendous progress with our students. As I said, I'll send you the link so you can actually check that out. But the consultant was on the program as well, talking about some of the things that have been done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Supplementary?
Yes, I do. Just a quick supplementary. I was just wondering. Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, you mentioned that over the next 15 months, so I expect that the primal academic innovation will be around for a year, but I'm just wondering whether we have any long-term contract with them, and also what the annual cost for the consultation or the program is.
And thank you for that question. I actually I do know what the cost is, but I don't have it here in front of me. The idea and the reason we've contracted them over the next 15 months is because of COVID, we had a disruption, and we were literally unable to do as much as we wanted to do with them in 2020. And so some of the work that they were doing in 2020 had to get carried over. And then, so we ended up having to extend. Once we talked about middle school and senior school, once we saw how good everything was going. But I will endeavor to get those numbers to you because they're public. They should be in the public domain because it's a contract that had to go through OPMP and all of that stuff. And so I'll endeavor to get those numbers for you.
Thank you.
Is there any further supplementaries?
No further supplementaries from me.
Thank you, Minister. I think that brings a close to the questions that members wanted to put to you in reference to your statement. So thank you for your
Mr. Speaker.
Members.
I know you haven't been looking, but I'm sure you noticed my St. George's colors today.
I need not mention what's here. Members, I will move on to the next statement this morning that has questions, and that is for the Minister of Health. Minister, MP Dunkey would like to put a question to you, or questions. MP, would you like to put your questions?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On page 2, Minister, you mentioned health professionals in general have noticed a reduction in the number of people seeking health care during the pandemic. And then further, you go on to state on page 3, the common cause for the reluctance to seek health care is due to concerns about patients' exposure to coronavirus. Minister, would you agree that it's possible that because of the lockdown, offices being closed, and significantly operations being put on hold in the hospital, this is another major reason why we've noticed a reduction in the number of people seeking healthcare?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that there's a number of things that are possible. However, as I've indicated in the statement, based on what the healthcare professionals have indicated as to the reasons they've noticed a reduction in persons attending to their personal health and seeking the preventative types of healthcare that they normally would have done pre-pandemic.
Supplementary?
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
In light of the fact that the pandemic has caused
AI-powered writing system enabling.
Yes.
Not sure who's playing with the computer. So
Yeah, I think it's muted now. Okay.
Okay, thank you. In light of the fact, Mr. Speaker, that there has been established through the pandemic a long waiting list for operations at the hospital, what is the Ministry of Health and the hospital doing to try to catch up to this long waiting list? I understand that operations are only done at night for emergency. What plans are in place to try to help us catch up? Because quite often seniors are the ones on a waiting list, and obviously they don't have time at hand to wait for it to be cleared up.
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, actually, that is a matter of public record. As recently as I believe a week ago, BHB did provide a statement to the press as to the status as it relates to the operating procedures as well as outpatient and inpatient procedures. As BHB has always reported, emergency surgeries were never put on a waiting list. Those were always done, obviously, because of the emergency nature, but they recently did publish what the statistics were pre-pandemic, pandemic, and now as it relates to the degree of waits and the services that are being provided through the operations, either as an outpatient or inpatient services.
Supplementary?
Yeah, supplementary to rephrase that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was aware of that release, but my supplementary is more specifically at what measures are being taken to catch up on surgeries, noticeably elective surgeries that have been put on hold with the extensive waiting list.
Mr. Speaker, that is Mr. Speaker, that is something that I will endeavor to get that information directly from BHP, who obviously would have that information.
Thank you. Second, put a second question now. Use your supplementary.
Yes, I thank the Minister for the commitment. Second question, Mr. Speaker. In shifting attention to the latter part of the statement in talking about mental health, and certainly we're pleased that the government is focusing on mental health, and as the WHO has stated that no health without mental health. The question to the Honorable Minister, what is the Department of Health and the Bermuda Hospitals Board doing to ensure that the required resources are dedicated to this significant challenge as highlighted by the Minister in the statement today?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I can report that there have been advances insofar as resources provided to MWI to ensure, and I'm talking financial resources, which obviously can filter into human resources. Mr. Speaker, for the fiscal year 2020-2021, MWI received a $1.4 million increase in capital, as well as $1.7 million with respect to the expansion of services, which you may recall during the budget we spoke about, and that included the expansions of the services related to intellectual disability, as well as services related to the community mental health treatment orders. In 2021-22, Mr. Speaker, Bermuda Hospital Boards through MWI, through the Bermuda Hospital Boards received a $4.5 million increase in infrastructure grants and upgrades as it relates to the MWI services. Mr. Speaker, we recognize as a community and as a government that supporting mental health is extremely important, and we understand that there are challenges and that everyone needs to do their part as it relates to mental health. And I've indicated in this particular statement certain things that we individually can do and collectively to ensure that we take care of our own mindfulness and our own mental health. But services are being provided through MWI with respect to the child adolescent services, as well as their psychiatric outpatient services and acute services, and in tying to the Throne Speech Initiative of integrated medical healthcare services. Mr. Speaker, you would note that MWI does provide community services through the Hamilton Health Clinic as well as Lamfogo to provide services and meet the community's needs where they are in an integrated fashion, as well as to help to reduce the stigma of mental health.
Any supplementary?
No supplementary, just the opposition fully supportive initiatives to deal with mental health challenges from COVID. Thank you, Mrs. Speaker.
Third question?
No, Speaker, that covers the minister's statement.
Okay, thank you. Minister, you also have MP Pearman would like to put questions to you. MP Pearman?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Minister. You identified in your statement that we are now living safely with COVID, which means adjusting to the new normal. And one of the things that's been discussed around that is the travel authorization form. I'm just curious, Minister, is the decision to scrap the travel authorization form a decision for you or a decision for Cabinet? I appreciate there's consultation with the Chief Medical Officer, but is it your decision or is it Cabinet's decision? Thanks.
Minister?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, not trying to be difficult, but according to Standing Orders number 17, questions need to relate specifically to the nature of the statement that is presented, which, as you will note, deals specifically with mental health as well as our health and well-being. So how the travel authorization question would not have been asked previously to a minister that spoke directly about it is completely contrary to Rule Order 17.
Minister, you are correct. I did slip past that one, so thanks for bringing it to my attention. Unfortunately, remember, that question doesn't relate to the statement that was given this morning. If you can reframe a thought that it's related to this morning's statement, you can put a question.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I had quoted the fact that we are now adjusting to a new normal. Part of that new normal is restrictions on our travel, and that was the basis for my question. But I'll follow your guidance, Mr. Speaker. That statement appears on the second page in the third paragraph.
Mm-hmm. But the gist of the statement was in reference to the mental health and trying to deal with people or community awareness around the mental stress that may have arisen or it could has arisen as a result of the COVID and the impact of COVID-19 on the community and individuals specifically.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll follow your direction. It's a shame we don't get an answer for that for the general public. But anyway, also on that page in the second paragraph is a statement of the percentage of the population that's fully vaccinated, Mr. Speaker. It says 74.4% of our population is fully vaccinated. I just invite the minister to confirm whether fully vaccinated is 2 shots or if it's 2 shots and a booster. Thank you.
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, fully vaccinated in our context is 2 shots.
Supplementary? Supplementary?
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Minister, that brings to a close to the questions from members for your statements this morning. Thank you, members, for your participation. The next statement this morning from the Minister of National Security. Minister, members have questions for you as well. And the first is from the opposition leader. Opposition leader, would you like to put your question up?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to direct the minister to page 7. And he says, this includes the police. He's talking about community involvement. And he says, if you know something, say something. This can be done anonymously. Silence is an enabler to those who commit violent acts. Mr. Speaker, we know that a number of people have witnessed some of these violent acts around the community and they've been silent. It's come to my attention that most of the witnesses or people who have been silent are silent because they feel that they will have no protection if they came forward with information. Now, I know that we have anonymous tips, but the anonymous tips only remain anonymous until they get to the court, when the person has to appear in person. And as a consequence, my question to the minister is, what protections are in place for anonymous witnesses or people who have information that would like to share it, but they would assure that they'll be protected from the gangs or the perpetrators of these violent activities? Because that's the real concern.
Thank you. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Opposition leader, thank you for that question and observation. What I say, and I implore people that in order to get around the feeling that your identification may come out, is to find someone of trust, be it a police officer that you personally know, a clergy member, community person, somebody that you can trust, because I think at this point in time, the police do a human's job in trying to keep people's identities as confidential as they can. So other than that, I think just find someone you trust and see if you could impart the information to them.
Supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So wouldn't it make sense if we put some type of legislative protection mechanism in place for witnesses so that they can come forward and help address the community surge that we have with this violent and unacceptable social behavior? Have a proper infrastructure to protect the witnesses. Because as we all know, people see things happen, but they're just fighting to raise their hand because they may be targeted, and so they need the protection. And we should provide them with their protection directly. So can the minister give an undertaking to look into providing protection for witnesses who are bystanders and not involved in any wrongful doings in the community?
Good point, Mr. Opposition Leader, and that bodes well with what I'm endeavoring to do, trying to get relevant people under one umbrella, so that we can look at everything that is involved in bringing perpetrators to justice. So that too would be on our agenda to try to see what best we can do to improve the system that we have in place now.
Supplementary?
Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay. Minister, you have other members. The next member is MP Pearman. MP Pearman, would you like to put your question? MP Pearman? I'll move on to the other member.
I'll defer to the shadow minister first. Thank you.
Okay. MP Dunkley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, your colleague MP Kim Swan from the Eastern constituencies made an impassioned motion to adjourn speech a couple of weeks ago about violence and the need for UK intervention. Do you as Minister and do Cabinet support this call?
Minister?
I have not said anything about whether one way or the other, and Cabinet has not indicated one way or the other. But again, what I will say, that I will bring all stakeholders, as many as I can, the relevant stakeholders under one umbrella. We will put on the table every single option and or possibility so that we could eradicate the scourge, which is non-partisan, non-political, and whatever option that could best serve this community, we will use.
Supplementary?
Next question, Mr. Speaker.
Second question, go ahead.
Yes, on page...
that's the alarm going off. We've actually used
I thought there was one more.
60 minutes. We've used the 60 minutes. We started at 11:23. It's now 12:24. Members, I thank you for your participation in this morning's question and answer period, but time has expired. Thank you all members. Appreciate your contributions this morning. We now move on the order paper. And the next item on the order paper this morning is congratulatory and obituary speeches.